Toslom Fa is the name of the leader. A tribal chieftain, he was originally a simple Jum cultivator who believed breaking out of cholera was the local god's fury, and that people must leave the area if no amount of animal sacrifice and offers of rice beer could please the angry god. India's independence and subsequent merger of Tripura and other princely states one day swept him off his Jum plot. For the freshly imported democratic setup required people's representatives to rule the country. Political parties that recruited erstwhile nawabs, princes, zamindars, and other influential persons were at a loss how to penetrate vote banks in the hilly parts of the country's northeast region. Or, for that matter, how to access the impregnable mindset of the remote northeasterner. Their natural choice was tribal chieftains that held sway over sizable numbers of people. Toslom Fa was one such recruit who represented a remote hilly constituency. Oh yes, it deserves mention here that he was also the perfect personification of the transformation from monarchy to democracy. As a tribal chief, he was the darling of Tripura's last ruling king, Maharaja Bir Bikram. The king would go to any length to oblige Toslom Fa, simply because of the latter's boundless loyalty coupled with extraordinary innocence. Toslom Fa was incapable of consciously committing a sin. A wise child he was. Once, the king embarked on a long journey to one of the kingdom's most tempestuous parts, just to oblige Toslom Fa. The childlike chief had only one wish in life: to host the king in his village for a whole day and night. He'd promised his clan people he'd make it happen. Imagine the king, and by king, I mean a huge entourage, a miniature working version of his entire administrative machinery, trudging to a remote corner of the kingdom, all to please an insistent tribal chief, and spend a night or two among the richest of the rich subjects, who had Mother Nature herself as their benevolent caretaker. The king had to leave his hilly domain, catch a train in neighboring British India, ride to a spot where he could re-enter his kingdom, then boat a few hours to a divisional headquarters. After a day's rest there, it was elephant's backs for another trek to Toslom Fa's hilltop hamlet. Toslom Fa and his villagers had built bamboo and thatch huts to host the royal party. Such was the power of his insistent innocence that the king rejigged his schedule and stayed an extra night, just to entertain Toslom Fa and his fellow villagers. Naturally, when the king and his supposedly imperishable monarchical world suddenly vanished and tribespeople were asked to elect their own representatives, Toslom Fa became the prized catch for one political party. They plucked him straight from his Jum field. And well, here is what happened next. Many a tale about his exploits as a minister is afloat in Tripura. While most of the tales are faithful accounts of his hilarious exploits, one cannot rule out the possibility of some latter-day additions from imaginative minds. It is known fact that political top bosses always prefer harmless, trustworthy elements to adorn their coteries. Toslom Fa was one perfect piece for such embellishment. Hailing from the remotest parts of hilly Tripura, he cut a figure of unassuming loyalty. Short and stocky, with a face weathered like old bark and eyes that twinkled with simple cunning. It was impossible to imagine him plotting against someone while keeping his designs behind tightened lips. Naturally, he didn't have to wait long to become a minister. Then came a day when he began pestering the chief minister to take him along on one of his trips to Delhi. "Mama, I want to see the city of Delhi," he pleaded in his thick accent. "It is very big, they say. Bigger than our Agartala market?" The chief minister, amused by this loyal sidekick's wide-eyed curiosity, chuckled and agreed. So, off they went. Toslom Fa in his starched kurta and a suitcase stuffed with dried fish from home. When seated in the plane, Toslom Fa noticed that other people were reading newspapers or magazines available in a folder in front of them. He took one and began reading it. Or so he thought, holding it with grave intent, his brows furrowed like a scholar. A girl sitting next to him, sleek in a cotton sari, translucent eyes behind dark glasses and reading a novel, looked several times through the corner of her eye. At last, she could not hold herself. "You are holding the magazine upside down, sir," she said with a polite smile. Toslom Fa, the minister, looked at her with grave condescension, his chest puffing out. "Zanbar manu ol tau zani," he boomed, meaning a knowledgeable person can read things upside down too. The girl blinked, stifled a laugh, and turned back to her novel. The chief minister, seated across the aisle, overheard and shook his head with a grin. Toslom Fa returned to his reading upside down, feeling quite the sage. Little did he know, the passengers around him were already buzzing. Who is this man? A minister, did you say? Forest Minister of Tripura. When the plane landed at Kolkata airport for a stopover, and they stepped out for a brief engagement with a friend of the chief minister, Toslom Fa was stunned to see the crowds on the streets of Kolkata. People swarmed like ants from a kicked hill, vendors shouting, rickshaws honking, trams clanging through the chaos. Is it market day here, Mama? He asked the chief minister, eyes wide as saucers, clutching his suitcase tighter. Back in Tripura Hills, he had seen such crowds only on market days. And even then, not this dense, not this relentless. Delhi hit him like a dust storm. The airport alone was a madhouse of flashing lights, honking taxis and buses rushing everywhere. No open fields, no bird song, just concrete swallowing the sky. At the hotel, a gleaming tower in Ludian's Delhi, Toslom Fa was in great trouble with his toilet-going habit. He had not yet fully accustomed himself to having a bowel movement in a small covered space. Back home, he had always done it in the open, under the morning sun, amid dewy grass, in the privacy of the jungle. Here, the porcelain throne felt like a trap, sterile and echoing. His guts began giving him problems, rumbling like distant thunder, twisting in protest. One evening, Toslom Fa pretended to stroll in the hotel lawn, admiring the small plants, creepers, and trees there. The next morning, his toilet was full of leafy twigs, blades of grass, and creepers. The never-surrender tribesman had finally found a way to create the right atmosphere for his morning ritual. One day, while out on a sightseeing walk, Toslom Fa felt a strong urge to pee. There were no suitable places in sight. Everywhere there were people, buildings, cars zipping like angry hornets. At last, he spotted a small bush under a roadside tree, half hidden by shadows. Without a second thought, he ducked behind it, adjusted a crucial part of his dhoti, and let loose with a sigh of relief. Soon, Delhi police constable materialized there and started berating him in rapid Hindi. Toslom Fa didn't understand a word of what the man was saying, but he understood the man was chastising him for peeing there. After listening to the guard for some time, Toslom Fa could take it no more. What the hell? He barked at the guard, swaying his hand. Not even a place around for peeing. What place is this? Go to my state, Tripura. There are so many places all around. Pee however much you like. To hell with your city here. The enraged policeman considered action against the rustic man, called some colleagues, and after a long tiring exchange of accusations and rebuttal, rescued one card from Toslom Fa's bag. A badge with his photo. Below the photo, a few printed words declared, Honorable Minister, Government of Tripura. The guard's eyes widened. Toslom Fa waved the apologizing constable off grandly, striding away as if he'd won a battle. However, the grandest scenes he created were back in Tripura. Perhaps they gave Toslom Fa the Ministry of Agriculture or Public Distribution. One day, while visiting his constituency, he heard that folks in a few villages had jum crops that failed that year. They were starving, scraping by on wild roots, jackfruit from the forest. It was a common occurrence in the hills. April, May, June were want times, when hill tribes ran out of food stocks and foraged wild roots, fruits, and vegetables from the jungles. Some even died of malnutrition or cholera outbreaks. Toslom Fa heard about the dire straits of people in his area and sent messengers to all affected villages asking them to assemble at one of the small administrative towns in the region on a particular day. When the hungry lot appeared, Toslom Fa led them to the government's food supply facility there. A medium-sized godown stacked with rice and flour. He simply summoned the guard, asked him for the key, and opened the godown for his people. Take away whatever you can. However much you can carry, he told them. When asked to explain, his reply was precise and full of logic. The food grains there are meant for hungry people, and for distributing them among the people you need my acquiescence. My signature. I simply made things simpler and faster. What is the harm? The chief minister reshuffled the cabinet and gave Toslom Fa the charge of forests instead. Soon after being sworn in as a cabinet minister in charge of forest, Toslom Fa asked his officers to summon all forest officials with 2 stars on their shoulder straps to the capital. Top bureaucrats at the secretariat were alarmed. They informed the chief minister of the development. The chief minister rushed to the newly installed minister, asked what it was all about. But Toslom Fa, with 2 or 3 incoherent words and a profusion of wild gesticulations, made it quite clear that he was unwavering in his decision and liked no intrusion. Helpless, the chief minister and the officials had to yield to his whims. When all the forest officials of the state with 2 stars on their shoulder straps were lined up before him, Toslom Fa scrutinized the faces of the officials one by one, and finally zeroed in on one and shouted, "Here he is. Mama, here is the man I've been looking for." Mama, meaning maternal uncle, is a term used by non-tribal people to address a tribesman in Tripura. Toslom Fa used the same to address the chief minister, for the wise man had decided to pay the non-tribal colleagues back in their own coin. The chief minister and the chief forest conservator, who were standing at a distance full of apprehensions, rushed to the spot. Toslom Fa, with wild gesticulations, was asking the hapless official to return him his dhow. It had so happened that a few months before the elections, when he was a nameless Jum cultivator, Toslom Fa had once fallen foul of forest laws. The official in question had caught him red-handed and confiscated his dhow. Toslom Fa, now a minister, had decided to make use of his power and position to get back his confiscated dhow. The chief minister tried to pacify him, saying his dhow would certainly be returned. But there was a bigger surprise in store. "Make him DFO," Toslom Fa boomed to the forest conservator, and turning to the CM continued, "You see, Mama, this fellow is the only forest official in the state who isn't corrupt. I tried to save my dhow by offering him bribes, but he is the only forest official I have seen in my whole life who did not fall for bribe." The straightforwardness of a woodlander and his inherent reverence for integrity and virtue must have floored all present there, as it floors us even to this day. This is the legacy of Toslom Fa, a man who bridged 2 worlds, a wise child who ruled with jungle logic, and a symbol of the past that the present can never quite forget, a symbol of monarchy that modern-day democracy could not quite stifle. If you want to hear more such insights from the living museum of ethnicity that is India's Northeast, do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow this channel.